Good morning, everybody. My name is Thomas Metz. Today we are talking about how soccer explains the world by Franklin Foer. First, we're going to get into the synopsis of where we're going to examine our book. And now we have the American journalist Franklin Foer. He basically, what he does is he traveled to several countries, study how culture of soccer is basically presented. Some examples are Serbia, England, Brazil, United States, a bunch of other ones. So what he does there is he decides to go on there to describe the influences of fan bases and cultures of soccer. So for an example, they could be from gang violence, corruption, war, nationalism, freedom, anything positive and or negative. They can be nationalistic. He also interviews fans of teams that are basically a part of the culture. And some of the teams that are included was Red Star Belgrade, Celtic, Rangers, Tottenham, AC Milan, and a couple others. Now, later on in the book, globalization will then be discussed, and there are also positive influences that are present in soccer. And globalization is one of the key themes, and it's very important to the culture. Some of the chapters that we'll also be looking at is like the United States chapter, which is chapter 9. This is where they have globalization, where he mentions that everything is that globalization is present everywhere in the United States. We'll also mention that in the later slides. And that Foer uses all of this to showcase how fans can create a positive environment in future events, such as like the World Cup, uh, yeah, soccer, and other international events around the world. Now, the first theme is globalization is basically the major theme of the entire book. Now, defining globalization is a process of expanding the realm of sports across the world and also coming together as one. And globalization is big around the world, especially like the World Cup, which I mentioned before. And also an example of globalization, there's leagues that are split into championship regions for competition, such as UEFA National UEFA Cup, CONCACAF, AFC, the Africa Cup, the Asian Cup, and Australia's its own continent, so I don't think Australia's there. But then there's also like huge global presence for specific teams slash leagues, such as like Man United, Barcelona, Real Madrid, PSG, now Inter Miami in the MLS. And there's a lot of teams that everybody wears everywhere. It's like Inter Miami with Lionel Messi. There's a lot of jerseys being worn all across the globe because of how big Lionel Messi is in the soccer world. Like I mentioned before, there's also big leagues like the Premier League, La Liga, Bundesliga. Now, how does globalization relate to to the book? The globalization is basically foretold as the world uniter when it comes to soccer. So, for an example, in chapter 9, or yeah, chapter 9, in Iran, women protested because they had less freedoms than men, and they used soccer as their escape and celebrated when Iran made the World Cup. Now, it wasn't taken too lightly because Iran, again, has very troublesome history with women's rights, and they don't have a lot of it. Now, the World Cup is also a big mention of globalization, especially as immigration and citizenship go on to share a country in the World Cup, and everybody gets together and unites as one, like they did in 2022 and all the other past. Now, also going deep into the book, soccer is basically a metaphor for globalization because it's all around the world and it's always used for positive scenarios and always made to make sure that soccer needs to go across the world. Now, in chapter 10, there's also one in American culture, you see different tons of national representation. Because, the United States is like the king of immigration. So we have tons of different countries, tons of different nationalities, always being mentioned in the United States, always being shared. Like for myself, I'm half German, half Irish. So I like to represent my German side and my Irish side by cheering on for them, like cheering on for Germany in the World Cup. There, a lot of other people are different because usually, that's like we learned in middle school, the United States is a stirring pot of immigration or the great American melting pot. We see a lot of different cultures, things everywhere. Like for an example, you see tons of jerseys from different clubs and countries around the world. Like you see a lot of Inter Miami, well, not Inter Miami, Inter Miami is MLS. You see a lot of foreign countries. You see a lot of jerseys there. And also, the sport unifies everybody, no matter what race, gender, and ethnicity you are. It is basically for everybody because you see a lot of cultures playing soccer. You see a lot of teams. If we playing in high school, we had a tons of different cultures and nationalities playing soccer for us, and it was a lot of fun interacting with them. So it also showcases the children that people are different and we can get along. Now, the second theme that is present in the book is nationalism. There's a secondary theme of the book. It is mostly used in a negative tone in the book. Sometimes it could be positive, but mostly it's just for danger. Now, definition according to Britannica, it's an ideology based on the premise that the individual's loyalty and devotion to the nation side surpass other individual or group interests. Excuse me. Now, nationalism also showcases one compassion with their country as leaders and governments. This could be good and bad depending on the type of government that you're cheering for, depending on if it's like that. Like, for an example, Chinese nationalism, or nationalism in China can be viewed as bad in other countries because other countries are at like not like war, but like at lengths with China. And a lot of them, like the United States, is always competing with China. So a lot of people consider China as like a bad nationalistic society, while some people look at like Germany's nationalism in World War II as bad because it was always the Nazis against everybody else. And some good examples of nationalism is United States and Canada because they always unite around their country and everybody's always together. So some of the examples in the book are Serbia, Ireland, Ukraine, Scotland, Brazil, England, United States, and Spain. And as mentioned before, all of them are vastly different from each other. Now there's also more on how nationalism relates to the book. It's like, for an example, in chapter 1, Serbia and Red Star Belgrade. There's multiple accounts of gang violence against opposing fans. There's also like beating up opposing fans and tons of fighting in the stands. There's also a lot of rich history that goes on. There's a ton of past wars that Serbia had to go through. So there's also like the Croatian War of Independence. There are also more war crimes between the two countries, like World War II, when Croatia and Serbia are very heavy rivals when it comes to countries and everything else. They're always at each other's throats. The rivalry is very tense, like especially World War II when Nazis collaborated with the Croatians to kill Serbians. And Red Star Brigade controls all of Serbia. It's a whole nationalistic society between that team, and nothing come against them. Now going more, there's chapter 5 with Brazil and Pele. Pele, in a sense, tried to go into the political world and tried to view Brazil into its nationalistic society and capitalistic society, and that ultimately failed. This also shows that soccer can also instigate worldwide political ideologies, and it can also be used as an escape from politics too. So it could be both ways. So it can either be in a political ideology with nationalism uniting with your party, or if you have like a one party state or one party country there. But that can also be bad. Like North Korea it's a one party thing, it's a dictatorship. So that nationalism is required in North Korea, and it could be a bad sign to everybody across the world. There's also more on how nationalism relates. So, like Spain in chapter 8, between Spain and Barcelona, everybody is united as one to escape political roots. And Spain, there's a lot of people, like in the United States, where a lot of people have different political views, which also creates a semi nationalistic mindset within their own views. And that could be good or bad. It's like the United States with Republican, Democrat, and Independents and other parties. They can either be good or bad depending on the spectrum you're on, depending on how you view things. It's good to always be in the centrist position, in my opinion, because you don't have to go through one side. Like for me, I have a couple liberal views and I have a couple conservative views, and I use that to formulate my thoughts. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, depending on the situation. And that also could turn into political turmoil, much like in the United States. Again, Republicans fighting Democrats fighting Republicans, blah, 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 anything else. And going to the United States, there are many different countries represented here because of immigration. You see that all the time. Like I said before, the United States is a stirring pot or a great American melting pot, like the Schoolhouse Rock song. And each country, each citizen has their own nationality and self-nationalism are referred to their past. Like, again, I'm German, half German, half Irish. You see a lot of different jerseys out in public all the time from different parts of the world. That happens in a lot of countries, but mostly in the United States is when you see it. Depends on people's nationalities. Like you see a lot of Mexican Americans wear their Mexico jersey, or you see a lot of German Americans wear their German jerseys, or you see a lot of Irish Americans wear their Ireland jerseys. You see it there all the time. And this is the good part of nationalism as Foer showcases. And the soccer can embrace nationality into oneself and creates a sort of bond with everybody else that can be shared throughout the world. Here are the sources, and that's it. Thank you guys all for coming to my presentation.